sports, but also in yoga. And we'll speak, of course, about the diaphragm, because the reality is that that's what the diaphragm is trying to achieve. There is an administrator in the group, which is Anna, and I want to confirm with her that she has started the recording, or she will start.
I started
the recording. Okay, great. So we can make this available to you. I was saying that we will be speaking about the diaphragm because really that's what the Buteyko Belt allows us to do, allows us to give a workout to the diaphragm. Is it the only way to give the diaphragm a workout? Of course not. But obviously this is an effortless one. You don't need to think about how your diaphragm is moving when you're having the Buteyko Belt, because there is a continuous restriction into its movement, and as a result, it will be working more. It will be useful to know how many people have a Buteyko Belt today, and if you don't have, I will be demonstrating how you can use a belt instead. And those of you that have a pair of stretchy clothes, I would imagine tights will do the job. You can apply the tights around your rib cage at the same place that I will demonstrate with the belt. Definitely, though, the Buteyko Belt allows for better adjustment of the resistance, and as a result, more comfort as well. So I will very quickly introduce myself, and then I will start speaking a little bit about the diaphragm, which will be, as I said already, the focus of today's masterclass. And then in a few minutes, we will kick off with whatever is meant to be covered in this workshop. So my name is Anastasis Janis. I'm an Oxygen Advantage Master Instructor based in London. And since 2017 that I did my training with Patrick, the first of a few trainings that I did with Patrick, I started running workshops. And a lot of, because I'm a yoga teacher, I was mostly teaching groups that are of yoga students, some yoga teachers as well. And a few years later, I started teaching in a few teacher trainings where they were inviting me. And basically what we're doing then, and we still do with some trainings, is that we basically try to implement functional breathing in a yoga practice. Now, the reality is that, in my opinion, yoga is 100% in line with the Buteyko method and the Oxygen Advantage. But a lot of the times, this information is lost because people are too much caught up into the techniques, and they are worried about whether they should use one nostril or the other, and in alternative nostril breathing or digital breathing or box breathing, but they forget what is the whole goal of it, which a lot of the times, or if not most of the times, I should say, is to slow down the breath and make the breath lighter. So these two qualities of breathing, right? Time and volume. So this is a little bit about my background. Feel free to ask any questions in the chat, and at the end I will answer them. You are if something comes up and it's urgent, of course you can also leave it on the chat, and Anna will ask me, will let me know. So a little bit, as I said, information about the diaphragm. So the diaphragm, everybody, I'm perfectly sure, I'm sure knows, sits at the bottom of the lungs. And the reason why it is such a big thing when it comes to breathing is because the moment the diaphragm contracts, it moves down and in. I will speak in a second a little bit more about that. And as a result, it gives more space to the lower part of the lungs, where we have a higher concentration of alveoli, and as well as a higher concentration of veins to have the exchange of gases that the lungs are there to facilitate. So when the air travels to the lower part of the lungs, we have more alveoli, more contact between the airways and the bloodstream, the circulation. More oxygen can pass on to the bloodstream, attached to red blood cells and the hemoglobin, and circulate the rest of the body through that place. So this is why the diaphragm is really the primary respiratory muscle. This is why the diaphragm has a key role and is synonymous with functional breathing. As we will cover today, and we have covered in previous master classes, this is not the only respiratory muscle. And there are a lot of other respiratory muscles. Some of them get usually the label of respiratory muscles, some they don't. But the reality is that there are many other respiratory muscles, muscles that participate in breathing. And some of them, they will facilitate the more uptake of oxygen, and some will not, but, and that's quite interesting in my opinion, and we will cover more today, they allow the muscles that, and the lungs to operate more freely, allow the muscles that control breathing, such as the diaphragm, to move more freely. Does it make sense? Imagine there is a muscle, and we'll speak later on, that attaches to the diaphragm. If this muscle is tight, will the diaphragm be affected by it? I would think so, yeah? And of course, this, as a result, this will affect how we breathe sequentially. I mentioned that I mentioned that there are other muscles. There are usually, I like to group the muscles that are affecting the breathing into two categories. One of them is the ones that are above the lungs, and the other ones that are below the lungs. The ones that are above the lungs usually get the label, as we say, secondary respiratory muscle, and a lot of the times they get a bad rap. So a lot of people I have come across, they think that they should never move their upper chest when it comes to breathing properly. I would not agree that. Actually, I would argue that you cannot take a full breath if you don't move at all your upper chest and your upper back muscles. Actually, I will argue that a lot of people, even if they wanted to, they would not be able to move these muscles. That's, of course, not to be confused with excessively moving the upper chest. You know, there is a spectrum within where we want to mobilize these muscles. We will come to work with these muscles in a bit. The muscles below the lungs, though, that are also participating in respiration, they can also be grouped into two subcategories. We have the contractus lumborum and the psoas, that both of them attach from the back to the diaphragm. And they are both very key postural muscles, which is, if you want to think, one of the many ways why good posture equals good breathing. But then also we have the abdominals. Now, I'm sure it is a common knowledge among a lot of you that that the diaphragm, apart from its role as a respiratory muscle, it's also a postural muscle. It is contracting and activated when we need to maintain a posture, right? Imagine the following: imagine you're about to lift something heavy from the floor. Is it likely that you will breathe in a certain way? The breathing is not necessarily that you need the oxygen, it's the more that in fact you need to contract the diaphragm in a certain way. We've done some exercises in the past on this topic, and probably that will be the focus of a future masterclass. Yeah, the relationship between abdominals and the diaphragm. Now, this is what I would like to say. Of course, the anatomy of respiration can go on for a long way, but I'm not going to spend more time. I want to finish off with one last thing. That and this is something that I've said, again, something that is yeah, usually common sense, but common knowledge, but who knows, maybe there are some people that are new into the whole field, and it would be good to be aware of. So I said that the diaphragm moves down, but in as well. So the diaphragm has a concave shape. A lot of the times it's referred to as a dome. Sometimes it's referred as two domes because there is a left and the right diaphragm. But it moves down. Now, just above the diaphragm is the heart, like it really attaches to the diaphragm. By the way, the middle of the diaphragm, the top part is fascia tissue. It's not muscle. And overall, even the part of the diaphragm that is muscle, it's very, very thin. So if I was holding a diaphragm here in my hand, you would not see the same amount of volume of tissue that you would see if I was holding a bicep or a heart, right? These are much bigger tissues. This will be like a very thin layer, but nonetheless, still quite strong, still very resilient, still very important for life. Now, I said that the heart sits just above the diaphragm, so we have this concave shape, and it moves down, but it moves down up to a certain point, and then it moves in. And the reality is that if you measure, if you notice, if you measure the distance between how much it moves in and how much it moves down, it starts by moving down, then it moves in. But in someone that breathes fully, the moving in is bigger in terms of distance than the moving down. That would make sense. I would imagine so, because of course the need to take a bigger amount of volume of air in is vital for life, right? A lot of the times taking bigger breaths in will be very important. Having said that, we don't want something as sensitive and as important to life like the heart to be moving a lot. Would that make sense? The heart, again, another part of the body that is very important. So we don't want the heart to be moving like, for example, 5-10 centimeters. Okay, lots of more information we could be speaking about it, but let's get into the practice. And before I demonstrate how you could be using the Buteyko belt and the band or leggings, I would like to give some kind of heads up in terms of the safety of using all of that. First off, pregnant women should not be practicing. Now, I think it's like, self-explanatory that, but yeah, you should not be putting any pressure into this area of your body. Another category of people that I think they should take extra care is, be extra careful, is people that have done any operations recently in that area, because maybe there is some recovery still going on, there are some wounds, and these are in the healing process. But also, I would say people that have any chronic problems, gastrointestinal, as well as cardiovascular. Usually, from my experience, people that are falling into the categories of people that have to be careful are the people that need these exercises the most. But usually this means that they need a little bit of extra attention of someone that is an instructor. So from here, I would like to demonstrate first with the band, and then I will be putting the belt on myself in case you have one and you have not used it before. So a band, any band really will do. This would not probably be ideal. I should have one of the more thick ones, but but even this would do. Actually, I have had clients that worked with something like that before. So where do we want? We want to put it on the most wide part of the rib cage. Now, men and women, from what I have seen, tend to have slightly different structure of rib cage. Women overall tend to have more narrow rib cage and more small lungs. Of course, it depends. That's an average. Usually, it is around the 6th to 9th rib. So we have 12 ribs. The last one or two can be floating. Depends. Even the 10th can be floating in some individuals. Maybe even on one side only. And from there, I'm putting it. So if the last three is the floating ones, then you can go a little bit higher. So this is between the 9th and the 6th and the 9th. And you can apply the band at this stage. Depending on how tight, how elastic the band is, you can put quite some pressure into how tight it is. And as you see here, all I have achieved at this stage is to, every time I'm breathing in, and I should have mentioned a little bit more about the importance of lateral breathing, but we will cover it very soon when we do the exercises. When I'm breathing in, as you see, I'm pushing against the band. I hope it is clear from this angle. I will turn front So you will see that when I'm breathing in, my lungs laterally extend, and as a result, the band provides some resistance. Now, this is much more nicely done when I'm using a belt. So the Buteyko belt has two straps, Velcro straps. So you can apply it again at the same place. Another benefit of the Buteyko belt is that it's, of course, a lot thicker. So you can find that one of them goes on top than the other. It will be self-explanatory, as only one of the two sides has this Velcro surface. You apply it first. This will provide some resistance, but on top there is this extra layer that can make it even more intense. Okay, and from there you can start breathing. Of course, if you find that this is not strong enough, all you have to do is make it tighter, and with this way go as tight as you feel it's appropriate. I would encourage you to gradually build up the tightness, because we will speak in a bit about when is the occasions that we want that it would make sense for the belt to be very tight, and in which cases we probably want to go a little bit, be a bit more gentle. I will quickly have a look. I would imagine that there are no questions at this stage. I will have a look at what I have written down in terms of things that we have to cover. Is there any questions?
There was just a request in the previous video for the postural region.
A request. So everybody that has registered for this event, and I assume that obviously you have registered in order to be here, will receive an email from me very soon, within the next 12 hours, maybe within the next couple of hours, with all the information, with the recording of this masterclass. So if you have to leave for whatever reason, you can catch up later. And I will also put the postural video and the stress-free for the one again for stress that we run in December. So you will get all of that later on.
Also, the position of the belt relative to the sternum.
So the second question, I don't know if you could hear, is about the position of the belt relative to the sternum. Because this belt is quite thick, it is likely to cover the sternum at the lower part of the sternum, but not the entire. The point is not about the sternum. The point is about applying pressure to the rib cage. That's the way we are able to access the diaphragm. If I was to turn sideways and try to demonstrate where my diaphragm is somewhere here. So as my diaphragm is, and of course the diaphragm moves, but when it is at rest. So if I have, can you see that there is this small movement sideways as I demonstrated before, and if I was to turn forwards turn on my side to you, you would see that there is a small pressure on the front. Remember that the breath ultimately is a 360 action. Yes, there's one more.
Requesting a lighter colored top.
Oh, okay. That's the belt. Like you can see my fingers on the belt. I will refrain from changing my top because it will delay a little bit the master class. That's the only reason. But thanks for the feedback. In the future, I can wear a brighter color. But as soon as you put it on properly, that's fine. Of course, women, especially if you have bigger breasts, you want to have the belt underneath your breasts. For men, this problem does not exist. So yes, this is where you can see, this is my chest finishes, and just is here where the belt starts and finishes. This is the level where you want the belt. Yeah?
And how long do you practice nasal breathing before using the Buteyko belt?
You can start to be, as soon as you, another question, I will repeat the question in case you could not hear. How long should one practice nasal breathing prior to using the Buteyko belt? You can start straight away. You don't need to wait to get your black belt in nasal breathing before start using the Buteyko belt. The reality is that nasal breathing will affect to some extent the biomechanics, right? Because we know that there is a strong link between using our nose and activating our diaphragm, but it's primarily affecting the biochemistry, because you also know that when we're breathing from the nose, we are maintaining more healthy, let's call them, levels of carbon dioxide in the body. So it's primarily a biochemical, we are affecting the breath on a biochemical level. On the other hand, when we are doing exercises like this, we are affecting our breath on a biomechanical level. And this is, this is what we are doing here. So we are combining some biochemistry, some biomechanics. We'll do that later on when it comes to doing some exercises.
And the other question was, how do I ensure that I'm wearing the Buteyko belt correctly?
So especially if you have a Buteyko belt, it's very hard not to make it to go wrong, because as long as you are among the widest part of your rib cage, your rib cage is very much shorter here. So the rib cage has this shape, right? I'm sure you have seen shapes of rib cage. So it is around this element, where I said that it's a 6th to 9th rib, which is the widest. Now, even if you were to move it a little bit lower, you still cover the widest part. And even if you were to move it a little bit higher, you are probably still going to be fine. Yeah? Because ultimately there is a way of, so this is very easy to answer if it comes to use the Buteyko belt. If you're using a band, it might be a little bit trickier because the band is much smaller, so it affects a smaller part of the, it applies on a very small part of your rib cage. So don't worry, it's more a matter of just putting it on and doing all the exercises that we will cover right now.
And like, how much resistance should they feel from the belt?
The next question was, how much resistance should they feel from the belt? We will cover this answer into much more detail throughout this class. But initially, I would say put it on and try to put some tight enough for the beginning of the session. But later on, I will tell you in which cases you probably don't want to make it too tight. But initially, there is no, it's almost impossible to tighten it too much. I mean, I'm very comfortable. I have tightened it quite a bit myself now.
And Suzanne just mentioned thinking it might also help with posture when sitting. She should just...
Yeah, okay, yeah. Let's leave any suggestions. Thank you very much. It might help for posture. Of course, every time we use the diaphragm, it helps our posture. But let's move on, because the reality is that we have not even started the workshop and we have plenty of things to cover. Yeah. So I'm going to section now. The first thing we would like to do is we would like to cover a few stretches that you wanted to be doing prior to putting the Buteyko belt on. So I will, if you have it on already, I suggest you take it out. And the idea here is the following, that depending on someone's, and this is really depends on the individual. There is nothing wrong with performing these stretches while having the Buteyko belt on. But I would say that for people that are feeling that they are not using their diaphragm enough, they are feeling people that are having a little bit of compromised posture, from scoliosis to sedentary lifestyle, whatever the reason is, they would benefit by mobilizing a little bit more these secondary or auxiliary, whatever we call them, breathing muscles first, and then giving the diaphragm a workout. So you can follow along with me. You can be in a seated position. We will start with the neck. So splenomastoid and scalenus, two muscles that are active during breathing. We will try to stretch them. So I would like you to drop your head towards the left. And from now on, I would like you to maintain nasal breathing, soft breathing. Notice that while I'm dropping my head towards my left, well, it is my right, but I'm copying, I'm saying the opposite of what I do, so that it is easy for you to mirror me. My shoulder stays down. I'm not lifting my shoulder, because ultimately it's this side of my neck that I'm stretching. And now back up and to the second side. soft breathing. Feel free to pay attention. Those of you that have kept until now the belt on might have already become more aware of of the movement of your diaphragm. Slowly your ear is moving closer and closer towards your traps. Note that we're holding these stretches for some time. And back up. This time we're going to go to the first side, and the first thing I would ask you to do is try to look up towards the ceiling. So you're turning your chin as if you're trying to look up. The neck is a part of my body I stretch every day, a lot of the times more than once. So if you find that you can go beyond me, great. If you find that you cannot reach, bring your head as far down, no worries. And see if you can go a little bit further. Maintain soft breathing. Another area which we have covered a little bit in these master classes, but in much more detail in the Thursday yoga classes that are available on the Oxygen Advantage YouTube channel. There are 19 of them, is how, and slowly come up, recover your breath for 2 breaths, breathing slowly, and then go to the second side. Is how to use the breath to improve flexibility, how the two can complement each other. There are 19 classes there. This is covered into quite a big extent, but of course we go even further in the Breathing for Yoga course that I'm teaching with Patrick. So slowly you go for the last few seconds with your ear even further. And slowly release. Next thing you will do is you will drop your chin towards your chest. Now, in some individuals, the chin will not touch the chest, and that's fine. You don't want to keep it down. Now, what's important here is to keep the shoulders back. So while I'm bringing my chin down, I can almost think of bringing my shoulder blades towards each other. You don't have to do it. As long as you don't round your shoulders, that's absolutely fine. And from there, one time, you drop your head towards the right while still touching your chest. And to the center and towards the left. And slowly release. The next muscles that we will target is 2 muscles that are affect the shoulder position. Now, I would imagine if I was to ask you if some of you would like to improve the position of your shoulders in your body, I would imagine that some of you would like that. So these 2 muscles affect the position of the shoulders. We'll start with the lats. In my experience, there are almost 70% of people that have compromised shoulder position, not because of the deltoids being tight, but because of their lats being tight. So for the first one, you can be standing. If you have sensitive knees, apart from putting a pillow underneath your knees, you can't be standing. You could have your hands on a table or on a wall. So you would be doing it like that. But I will demonstrate it kneeling. It will be the same thing. So hands are in front of you. As long as it should be accessible for most people, I believe, to have the hips above the knees. If that's too much, you can make it a little bit easier by resting your hips further back. So from here, I would like you to bring your shoulders to touch your ears and keep walking your hands forward. And depending on how flexible one is, some people may have the tendency to go with their armpits towards the floor, and some people will not. I would suggest go where you can find the stretch in this part of the body, where the lats are. The 2 approaches serve different purposes, but it's beyond it goes beyond the purpose of this meeting today to discuss how these 2 stretches. So if you don't feel anything here, you can walk the hands a bit more forward. If you don't feel anything yet, bring your armpits towards the floor It's not that one is better than the other, they are just different stretches. And now what you can do is walk the hands towards the right side, so you can be slightly on a lateral, on a side flexion for the spine. We will be doing a couple of more side flexions in a second, and it is because a few of the muscles that are involved in the diaphragm are stretched during side flexion.
Please,
The lats is one of them.
Please, can you show it also on the wall, standing on the wall, how you do it?
All right, and release. So I promise you to, I promise you to stretch two muscles, and you can walk. The second one is the pec minor. So the pec minor sits on the pector, on your pecs where the chest is. So for this one, I would like you to rest on your abdomen, bring the left arm out. So the left hand is same level with your eyes. Right hand is on the side of the head. And from there, I would like you to pivot on your shoulder. So you see now I'm sideways, and I would imagine that for a few people, this would be a good stretch. If that's the case for you, please stay there. Again, very, very useful stretch. Now, if you feel pain on your elbows, you may want to go for a variation of this stretch where the elbow is 90 degrees bent, and this will take care. If you choose that option, you will find that you cannot go as far, and that's absolutely fine. You probably are stretching your pec minor here from a different angle. If you're in the first stretch and you don't feel much of a stretch, you can pivot completely and have your abdomen up towards the ceiling. And yeah, by focusing on this, just be careful if you have lower back sensitivities. And one thing that would be good to do here is to press the arm that is in contact with the floor down on the floor. I would suggest that you practice that for a bit longer, but because there is so much more that I would like to cover in this masterclass, I would suggest that we move on. So we go to the second side. We'll hold here for a couple of more breaths. Remember to soften your breath every time you settle into a position, especially when it comes to do with poses, with asanas that are involving stretch, that you want to go deeper in your stretch. Of course, there might be some exceptions. You may, oh, actually, no, it's not exceptions, but you can use different techniques. You can do breath holds and so on, but if in doubt, just soften your breath. We'll do two more exercises, three. The last one will be very quick. And for the next one, I would like everybody to come into a standing position. Have your feet a bit wider than the hips. I'm probably off the camera now. And you will fold forward. And now notice that my spine is straight. My lower back is straight. And from here, navel in. Some people will be a little bit higher. Some people will be a little bit, further down than me. And from here, you hold. Keep your navel in. You should feel no pressure in your lower back. If that's okay for you, you can start moving a little bit from side to side. And you will find that, again, with the spine straight, that by moving from side to side, you are stretching the opposite side. That's a great exercise for your QL. It can go a long way towards finding a comfortable seated position, but also it can support being standing upright. I'll take this opportunity to ask Anna if I can see there is at the back of the screen in the iPad there is a message, so I don't know if there is something we have to do.
So do you have some options of the stretches against the wall or maybe using the ball?
Correct, yeah. So there was this question about, did you hear that there is also a message there on the iPad that you want to check?
Yeah,
All right.
writing the messages.
Okay. Yes. So there was a question, but there is this message as well. So there was a question if there is a possibility of using a surface. Feel free to come out of the position. And yes, so if I was to use a Swiss ball, I would be able to have my hands supported and go here. And this would be an easier way of performing the last stretch. Yeah. So we answered that question. One more exercise. I would say these exercises, by the way, are very, very useful when it comes to breathing. The diaphragm is king, but these exercises are very, very useful. I would argue that someone that would struggle with these exercises probably can benefit a lot by doing them, even if it comes just to respiration, they don't care about their posture. And also I would say extra attention, if you perform these exercises, a lot of them are unilateral, so they are uneven. If you find it very different from one side to the other, this is probably, would call it an amber flag. Depends on how old you are, how healthy you are, and so on. But yeah, last one here. So you come into a low lunge position. Again, for people that are sensitive to their knees, they can put a pillow underneath the back knee, or what they can do is you can straighten the back leg, which will make it a little bit harder, but at least your knee will not be loaded. I know I have worked with people who have very sensitive knees, and even this high lunge cannot be is not an option, in which case stay in a much more narrow position. But to the extent that you can, and if you stay in a narrow position, tuck the tailbone under and release. A slightly different exercise. Otherwise, you stay here, and now here you're contracting your back glute. We are starting with having the right leg back, and you're keeping your ribs in. Very important, especially if you have the reflection of your body on the side from a mirror, to check that you are straight and you're not arching as much as possible. You don't lean forward. You're contracting your glute. And from here, I would like you to bring the left hand on the floor, right arm over your head, and push over. Some of you would prefer if they had blocks, because maybe they don't reach their hands on the floor. Let's release, let's switch. We're going to do the same thing on the second side. And then I would like us to put the Buteyko belt back on and start performing some exercises. I will speak also, we'll give you a little bit of a background, some exercises from yoga that they would benefit by using the Buteyko belt. Because there are so many, I will give you also a little bit, like as I said, a theoretical background. Right hand on the floor, this time left arm over your head, so that you know what, in my opinion, would make sense and what would not. Because obviously there are so many asanas, it would be impossible to cover, even if we allocated the entire class to that. So once you've done all of that, and that can be a way of checking at different times how flexible you are in these areas. You can also perform a cat-cow movement. So here you can lift your chest, arch your back on the exhalation. Usually we round the back and we send the tailbone forward. Very careful, people with lower back sensitivities. Personally, I'm not a big fan of cat-cow, but I think it definitely has its purpose. And for specific, you can do a few more specific demographics and specific people. You know, some people it will be a great exercise to perform on a regular basis. I just said that I'm not a big fan of it because I think there are better alternatives to mobilize the spine. So put the belt on, or put your leggings on your ribs, or what you have available. And we will be performing a couple of yoga poses. It's not, you don't need to be you have much experience in yoga, if any at all. I will give you a few different options. All right, and so we will start with some forward bends. And I will argue that forward bends are by far the most appropriate, I should say, the most appropriate movements to apply the Buteyko belt. And the reason for it is the following, that the forward bends naturally apply pressure to the diaphragm, right? Those of you that have done any other classes with me through the Oxygen Advantage platform, I have spoken many times about the effect that forward bends have on the diaphragm. But if we apply the Buteyko belt, we amplify that effect. Okay, so this is a seated forward bend. You can lift the skin underneath your hips. You can keep your knees micro bend. It's not so critical for the purpose of this, what we're trying to achieve now, and fold forward. Some people may prefer to have to be sitting on a block. This is quite, and then of course you can hold your feet and fold forward. And once you fold forward here, you can just soften your breath. And notice there is this expansion of your rib cage in all different directions. Now, as I've said, for a lot of people, usually because of lower back tightness, but sometimes also because of lower back and hamstring tightness, it's not very comfortable. So an alternative would be to be in a standing forward bend. Again, another exercise that I find it great even without the Buteyko belt. And keeping your head heavy, you fold forward, you can have your hands supported on the floor. If that is quite, it's too intense for you, you could be having the hands here or on blocks.
How long can you use the Buteyko belt from during the day?
This is not the topic what we're discussing now, so I suggest we don't, unless it's an urgent question, we don't address it now. Otherwise, the flow of the class will get interrupted. And I wanted to make sure that the screen is pinned. I am pinned on your computer throughout now, the whole class until now.
Yeah, you're pinned.
Okay. And for after this, so this would be a very straightforward one, but I would argue that in all the lunges, there will also be very important, right? And the reason for that is that in the lunges, we are having, we are usually stretching the hip flexors. Now, we are stretching the muscles in the front of our thighs. And usually this will put pressure on the lower back. Now, a very famous hip flexor, the psoas, will be attaching to the diaphragm, and as a result, will be affecting how the diaphragm moves. So it is quite, I would like you to go into Warrior One. I don't want to overanalyze here how to perform Warrior One, but just for the record, in case we have people that have not done any yoga before, absolutely fine. The left leg is facing forward, the left knee is as much as possible 90 degrees bent. We are trying to keep our hips square to the front, and the outside of the back foot is pressing on the floor. Our ribs are in, tailbone is forward. And a lot of the times, the Warrior One is performed with the arms extended up. Now, if I'm stretching a muscle that starts from here, but also attached to the diaphragm, you can imagine that this is a linked, there is a link, right? So we are keeping the diaphragm in check. We can activate the diaphragm. A lot of the times, a lot of people will be performing belly breathing in Warrior One. I don't think that's well, it is one option. I prefer more lateral breathing, which will, if anything, activate even more this expansion of our upper chest to the side. And here is Warrior Two. I would like you to perform both Warrior One and Warrior Two. And then we will perform Warrior Three as well, which is a little bit more hard. So in Warrior Two, the hips are, the shoulders, sorry, are above the hips. we are facing the side. I'm making an effort to keep my knee in line with my toes. My tailbone is tucked under, because I want to avoid arching my lower back. You cannot see, but believe me, and now I'm arching my lower back. Now I'm tucking my tailbone under. These are two exercises that you can perform safely in warrior with the Buteyko belt on. Let me demonstrate warrior 3. So warrior 3, maybe it's a good way to start to get into from warrior 1. So in warrior 3, you come forward and you lift the back leg, you keep your navel in, your shoulders are back. It can be a little bit harder, so you may find it easier if you micro bend the front knee. You want to be lifting the back leg up. Now, I've mentioned a few times that, well, not today, but in the past. So maybe there are people that have seen previous classes of me, that I advocate lateral breathing here. So navel in, and so we still use the diaphragm, but a little bit less, and then we make the most out of this locking of the midsection. Because I've mentioned lateral breathing a few times, just in case, for completion, in case we have some people that are not familiar. By the way, please go ahead and do the second thing on the second side. So we are in warrior 1 now. So we have the opposite foot forward, the other foot back, the back knee is straight. We want to keep the back knee straight to protect any pressure on the back knee that could bend at the back knee. But the focus here is on what happens to our midsection. In lateral breathing, I was saying that we don't allow the belly to expand forward. So instead of this Buddha belly action of belly breathing, we keep a small engagement, we keep our navel in, we keep some engagement in our midsection. This increases the stability of our midsection. And so when the diaphragm wants to move down, as a result, it creates a much bigger lateral expansion of the rib cage. It's very common in Pilates classes. So from here, we turn sideways, but this is not to say that we cannot use it in other activities. And from here, tucking the tailbone under, the knee is in line with the toes of the front foot. And that's, ooh la la, my God, we're running a little bit, we probably will run over by a few minutes. I hope that's okay with you. If you have to leave, that's fine. And then from there, warrior 3, we are lifting our chest. We are taking all the balance on one leg only. It is fine to keep the back leg a little bit lower. It is fine, like I said, to micro bend this knee as much as possible. You want to keep your hips square. Imagine you're balancing a tray at your lower back, shoulders back, neutral neck, lateral breathing.
How long should they hold in each position?
How long should you hold in each position? It was the question. Now, I usually favor holding positions for quite some time. I would argue that the longer you hold, the more the benefits of position, the more the benefits you will get from the position. Having said that, I have taught classes, and you will get a very big spectrum of different approaches to yoga if you're new to it. If you go and look at these 19 classes that I ran between July and December last year, in some of them, I was moving very fast. We were not holding any position pretty much for more than a few seconds. In some others, we held a little bit longer. Now, even longer than what you can imagine will probably be safe. I would suggest that if you're not sure, start by holding each position anywhere between 10 to 30 seconds. And of course, you always stop if you feel pain. If, of course, you're working with a teacher, of course, you listen to your teacher. Now, one thing that I was saying is that we want to be looking at potentially using the Buteyko belt in all sorts of different asanas. Are there any asanas that is counterindicated? I would argue no. However, there are some asanas that makes a lot more sense. So while in some people that I have consulted, I have told them, go off and do exactly the same yoga class that you're doing with the Buteyko belt on. It is safe, enjoy. I would say that forward bends is a great idea to use the Buteyko belt. All the lunges, and the yoga offers many of them, it's also a good idea. Balancing poses, we've done a few. We've done the Warrior 3. I will give you 2 more as an example, but the reality is that there are so many more. So here you can see my legs, but I think you will understand, you will recognize the pose. That's also often referred to as 3 pose. It's a balancing pose. Or you can do half moon. I mean, there are so many, it would be like, yeah, I'm finding my tree. I hope I don't knock it off during my half moon. So all of these exercises, because they require an extra demand, they bring an extra demand to the midsection, they are great opportunities to use the Buteyko belt, bring more awareness in this area.
What about just like people who like walking as exercise?
We will cover that. So the question was, what about people that like walking? If you like to walk and use the Buteyko belt on, is a fantastic way to do it, and I would strongly encourage you. Because I'm aware of the time, I will run a little bit over time, but I will not run a lot over time. So please let's leave some time for Q&A at the end. It seems like, you know, as a crowd today, you have questions. Sometimes nobody wants to ask anything. Let me finish off with other exercises, how you can approach them in yoga. So I would say that twist is also valid. So twist will be every time we have a rotation of the spine. So every time we go here, they would be appropriate. I would say that for side flexion, so lateral, it would make not so much. I would probably not avoid them, but I would think that there is not so much benefit that you will get. And the reason being is because inside flexion, the diaphragm is compressed unevenly. So there is, and the whole rib cage is compressed unevenly. So I'm not sure how it would work. I would say that it would be more awkward than anything. But, you know, like I said, still very safe. But twists, and there are many, many in yoga, you can, yeah, I mean, it's beyond the scope of this masterclass to cover twists, but that would be appropriate. And finally, inversions. Inversions would be great. So shoulder stands, because inversions, I would a lot of the times consider them as good for breathing as forward bends. So headstands, shoulder stands, all of these things, great to put the Buteyko belt on. One of the spine articulation movements that I didn't cover, spine extensions. I think for a lot of people, spine extensions are very hard work to begin with. If they are not for you, feel free to use the Buteyko belt. It will be great. Yeah, but if they are already a lot of work for you, you don't have to make them harder by putting the Buteyko belt on. Now, how can we combine the Buteyko belt and, you know, of course, the biomechanics that are addressed with some breathing? I promise you that we will do some exercises. We'll do one. And for this exercise, I would like you to come into a comfortable seated position, and I will guide you through. Of course, you're all very aware of how you should be breathing. So I feel like I'm preaching to the converted here, but I would just as a reminder, breathe softly, light, and it is something that it's very easy to forget here, because when I tell you when to breathe in, when to hold your breath, when to breathe out, when to hold your breath, it's very easy to get preoccupied by what I'm saying and try to catch up and forget what you have to be doing. So that's why I'm mostly saying it, not because you don't know. So maybe something worth for you remembering. Also, everybody has a different respiratory capacity. Some of you will find this exercise very easy. Some of you may be challenged a little bit more. The thing here is to see how we can be addressing the biochemistry and the biomechanics. We will be doing box breathing, but we'll be doing it in a way that I really like, which is a progressive way of building that up. Let's start. So you can close your eyes and follow your breath, soften your breath. Notice how the Buteyko belt is providing some resistance for your lungs. And now I would like you to inhale for a count of 3, 2, 3, and hold your breath for 3, 2, 3, exhale for 3, 2, 3, and hold for 3, 2, 3, eyes closed, inhale for 3, 2, 3, and hold for 3, 2, 3, exhale for 3, 2, 3, and hold for 3, 2, 3, inhale for 3, 2, 3, and hold for 3, 2, 3, exhale for 3, 2, 3, and hold for 3, 2, 3, inhale for 4, 2, 3, 4, and hold for 4, 2, 3, 4, exhale softly for 4, 2, 3, 4, and hold for 4, 2, 3, 4, one more round, same thing, 2, 3, 4, and hold for 4, 2, 3, 4, exhale for 4, 2, 3, 4, and hold for 4, 2, 3, 4, inhale for 4, 2, 3, 4, hold for 4, 2, 3, 4, exhale for 4, 2, 3, 4, and hold for 4, 2, 3, 4. We're going to do 2 last rounds. Inhale for 5, 2, 3, 4, 5, and hold for 5, 2, 3, 4, 5, exhale for 5, 2, 3, 4, 5, and hold for 5, 2, 3, 4, 5. Last round, inhale for 5, 2, 3, 4, 5, hold for 5, 2, 3, 4, 5, exhale for 5, 2, 3, 4, 5, and hold for 5, 2, 3, 4, 5. Release. Go back into your regular breathing and recover your breath softly. Suppress any potential urge that you have to breathe in heavier. It usually takes 2 to maximum 6 breaths in most individuals to go back into their regular breathing, as opposed to when they follow their instinct to breathe in heavier, in which case the breathing keeps going and it is quite heavy and it lasts much longer than 6 breaths. Lovely. And slowly you can open your eyes and come back. Feel free to leave on the chat if some of you felt some air hunger. I would imagine that some did, some didn't. And also write on the chat if you experienced if you were able to experience the restriction in the diaphragm while you are also felt the air hunger. So these 2 things, if you felt you moved into hypercapnia. Number 2, if you manage to be more aware of your diaphragm just because you're performing this exercise with the Buteyko Belt on. Now, the next part, so this was more or less what we had, not more or less, this was what I had said that I will cover in terms of the practical aspects of the Buteyko Belt, the practical exercises. Maybe we could have done a few more exercises, but that's fine, you know. We did some asanas, we did some, we did one breathing exercise. I would like now to speak about a little bit more about theory. And in the theory, what would I like to discuss? There are a couple of different, there are 2 different topics. Number 1 is how you can incorporate the Buteyko Belt into your workouts. I assume some of you are exercising in the gym, are involved in sports, and maybe you would consider how to use the Buteyko Belt in a workout. And then the next thing is how to use the Buteyko Belt when it comes to improving your sleep, as well as improve cognitive function. So when it comes to workout, I would argue that it depends on the the type of workout. So if the workout is going for a walk, like someone asked earlier, it is fantastic. If it is Pilates, yoga, Tai Chi, now I have not done Tai Chi in my life. Maybe I have done very few classes, but based on my understanding of Tai Chi, these are the type of workouts that you can have the Buteyko Belt on, no problem, it will be fantastic. Now, if you have more of a cardiovascular type of heavy, yeah, your workouts are cardiovascularly more challenging. What you probably we need to differentiate here is whether it is more of endurance or if it is more of a dynamic. So what would be endurance? Endurance would be someone that goes on and runs for 10K or 5K. I consider it to be endurance for me, although I usually run less than 5K. There is not a time that cuts off something to be called endurance and so on. But it is something that you have to sustain for quite a few minutes. And in these cases, I would say that it is absolutely fine to use the Buteyko Belt. It's actually very beneficial. You use the Buteyko Belt for a few sessions. So if you have a treadmill at home, if you have a static bike at home, and you can use this type of the Buteyko Belt into your regular workout. It will be a little bit more challenging, but when you try to do it without the belt, you will be probably flying, or at least finding it a lot more comfortable. You will potentially perform better. When it comes to dynamic, though, training sessions, then I think we probably want to use it a little bit less. It would not make so much sense. So if someone is sprinting, then I think the changes in the abdominals are very much more detrimental for performance. Can someone sprint and have the Buteyko Belt on? 100%, right? He's not going to injure himself because of the Buteyko Belt. But to me, it does not seem like a very logical thing to at least always do. Maybe you can try it. I would not say that you need to do it during your session. However, for all individuals, independent of your sport, and I took running because it is something that everybody can relate to. I'm sure there are people of all sorts of different potentially sports and activities that I would even not be aware. You have to think how it would apply in your case. But for all types of sports, what do we want to do at the end? We want to recover at the end, right? We want to accelerate the recovery. We want to be able to go as far back into our regular life as recover our body so quickly so we can start another training session if we have a very rigorous training practice. And one of the ways to accelerate the recovery is activate the diaphragm. And one of the ways, as you know, to activate the diaphragm is use the Buteyko Belt. So independent of your sport, dynamic, endurance, whatever it is, at the end, you can practice some breathing with the Buteyko Belt on. Even if you forget everything that we said in today's session and you take away this, I think you will find a very useful and beneficial for you way to use the Buteyko Belt. So forgetting the stretch that we said you can apply before putting it on. Forget how you can implement it into yoga. Forget how you can combine it with other breathing exercises. If you just perform your regular recovery diaphragmatic breathing at the end of your training session with the Buteyko Belt on, you will be strengthening you will be activating the diaphragm, you will be strengthening your diaphragm more. You are already 1% better than if you were not using it otherwise. Coming into sleep, I think with sleep, you can definitely be putting the Buteyko Belt on for a couple of minutes before going to bed. Better oxygenation of your body is likely to mean better rest. You can sleep with the Buteyko Belt on. I have done it a few times myself. I have not done it enough times to justify any conclusive results. Having said that, I remember that I slept better most of the times. Sometimes I find it a little bit restrictive. And that's where I would like to, that's the real point, both with cognitive work and with resting. Use it, I would suggest you use it for the first few times for 15 minutes prior to starting. So prior to start sleeping, you put the Buteyko Belt on, you'd spend 15 minutes, and then you take it off and you go to sleep. If at some point you find, you know what, I would probably mind giving it a go, you try to keep the belt on, and worst comes to worst, you find 15 minutes later, half an hour later, that it is too, now you need to take it off, and that's not the end of the world, right? Same thing with cognitive work, mental work, you want to concentrate, I would put it beforehand. I have never used it while doing computer work or any mental work, but I would imagine that will work fine. I would probably not do it. I don't want to have distractions when I'm thinking, and as a result, I would not want to have my diaphragm restricted, but you may want to have a go. I wanted to say one last thing, but before we address the questions, I would like to say one last thing in regards to sleeping. You may feel like, oh, but do I want to put a straight jacket on before I go to sleep? What type of sleep am I going to expect that I will have? What type of sleep are you expecting to have if you tape your mouth, right? So that's the idea. With a lot of these things that we are applying, we are actually challenging our body to do what it's meant to be doing. And while in the beginning it may feel awkward because we're not used to it, over time, these parts of the body that are meant to be working in a specific way will work, and we will get the benefits of diaphragmatic breathing, nasal breathing, and so on. Yeah, let's ask any questions. I will be repeating the questions because I'm not sure if the sound is delivered well.
What is the underlying principle of the Buteyko Belt, and how does it benefit breathing?
I'm wondering, so the question was, what is the underlying principle behind the Buteyko Belt and how does it benefit breathing? I would imagine that someone that asked this question probably just joined, because that was what I have been going on for more than 1 hour now. But in a nutshell, if I was to answer this question, I would say is that to challenge the diaphragm, to restrict the movement of the diaphragm, and to the extent that the diaphragmatic breathing is good breathing, is functional breathing, it will make you a better breather.
Can you all use both the belt and the mask?
100%. The question was if you can use the belt and the mask at the same time. 100%. The belt will work primarily on the biomechanics. The mask will work primarily on the biochemistry of your breath.
Why forward bending is so helpful for the diaphragm?
Because the question was why forward bending is so helpful for the diaphragm. When we are forward bending, the diaphragm is restricted. There is the pressure of we are increasing intra-abdominal pressure because as you can see, if you can stand in front of your mirror and you round your back, you probably will feel your abdominals contracting. You probably will feel like your belly is a little bit under pressure. But this increase of intra-abdominal pressure means that the diaphragm is not as free to move. If you are upright, the diaphragm can move down more freely. If you're rounded, the diaphragm cannot move so much or so easily. Yeah, and so much potentially. So when we are trying to breathe while forward bending, we're giving this challenge to the diaphragm. As a result, it can get stronger.
What is the respiration rate and volume during these exercises you showed today? What you are looking for?
What are we looking for in terms of respiratory rate during these exercises that we covered today? Low. Where you are is where you are because of your respiratory capacity, because of how stressed you are today, or how big of a meal you have eaten. When you have eaten a bigger meal, your gut will be more full, your respiratory rate potentially will be a little bit faster, your diaphragm will probably be moving less. What you want is to take it a step further. I have this exercise I call Count Your Breaths, and the purpose of this exercise is to reduce, to train the people that practice it to breathe as few breaths per minute as possible. So notice what comes natural to you and reduce it a little bit more. Don't get caught up into becoming competitive with your partner or with a friend on how much you can reduce your breath. You are where you are today. It is frequency in all of these exercises that will make the progress. If you practice it today and you practice it next week, you probably will not see much of a difference I would expect. But if you pick some of these exercises and you do them on a daily basis, I would expect that within 2 to 3 weeks maximum, you will be noticing significant differences. I have seen it time and time again in myself and in my clients.
And can you wear straight after a meal, or do you have to wait for 2 to 3 hours.
The question was whether you can put the Buteyko Belt on straight after the meal. The stomach is pretty much where the Buteyko Belt is positioned. Now, I would say that there are people, and I'm one example, that they go and exercise and will perform as much of a regular exercise as soon as they finish their last bite. Yet, common sense and probably sane digestive hygiene would say that you need to wait. The time that we take in order to digest is what will determine how quickly afterwards you have to put on. You see me not saying wait for 2 hours, and I will tell you why. Because in my experience, people with weak digestion, and by the way, for those of you that don't know, I am a nutritional therapist. I have been for like, 10 plus years. So obviously I have spoken with a lot of people about these things, that activities that are involved some peristalsis, promote some peristalsis, can be even a little bit of putting some cold water in the shower in your belly, will promote better digestion. And diaphragm can promote better digestion. But of course, it will also potentially restrict the whole area. Remember what I said in the beginning, people with gastrointestinal problems have to be extra careful. It will be a case by case. To stay safe, wait for a couple of hours. Oops, Miranda. Miranda is the name of my cat. Otherwise, I would say you can apply it when you feel that your stomach and gut is empty.
Is it good for people with low BOD score?
100%. 100%. If it is good for people with low BOD score, yes, please. If you have low BOD score, try to practice your breathing light, any other exercise, the Buteyko Belt.
And can it be worn the whole day?
Can it be worn the whole day? Absolutely. I have worn for extensive amounts of time. There's no problem at all.
Yeah. I think we went through all the questions.
Awesome. I didn't come to see you because I can only see the lens of the screen, but I can tell that this tonight was a great group just because of how many questions you asked and how much you participated. It goes to show that you're interested in using the Buteyko Belt. You are interested, of course, in breathing. It's so obvious. And it's always very refreshing to see people out there that are like myself and Anna. Anna, by the way, is also both a Buteyko instructor and Oxygen Advantage and the Pilates teacher as well. So yeah, thank you very much for your participation. I was not speaking just to the iPad. I was speaking to all of you that you asked the questions. And this was the third masterclass. I'm planning on continuing with them once a month. You will receive a link with the last two masterclasses, and I hope I will see you in one of the next ones. Thank you very much for joining wherever in the world you are, and I hope to see you soon again. I guess we can stop the recording now.